starting now. And we're going to try a poll just so we can see who is attending. So on your screen, you should be able to see, are you a member of either the Union of National Defense Employees, UNDE, another component, or a PSAC DCL? So if you could make your choices, I'll give you a minute or two to fill them in. I see quite a few people answering. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and then share the results. It does seem like a majority of you are from UNDE, and we have a couple of component people and a few DCLs. So I'm going to stop sharing the results. And then I'm going to have the pleasure of introducing our national president, Chris Aylward. So for those of you who do not know, Chris Aylward was elected as the national president of the Public Service Alliance of Canada at PSAC's 18th Triennial Convention in May 2018. He previously served as PSAC's national executive vice president from 2012 to 2018. Born and raised in Newfoundland, Chris has been an active member in PSAC for over 28 years. His involvement in our union started when he became a shop steward with Local 90000, Union of Taxation Employees at the St. John's Taxation Centre. In 1990, Chris transferred to the Canada Revenue Agency headquarters in Ottawa, where he became active in Local 70000 at UTE. Chris played a major role in the 1991 general strike as a communications officer for the National Capital Region, or NCR. In 1996, Chris was elected as UTE's alternate regional vice president for the NCR, and then became the full-time regional vice president, or RVP, in 1997. During his 14 years as UTE's NCR RVP, Chris spent many of those years as a member of the bargaining team. He helped to achieve important benefits and groundbreaking improvements for PSAC members working for CRA that were then negotiated for more of our members under other collective agreements. Chris was a vocal advocate for the rights of all members to a safe workplace, a fair wage, and a strong collective agreement. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Morgan, for this evening. And I want to thank you for inviting me to participate, and I want to thank everyone for joining this evening. I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you tonight from Ottawa, which of course is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I am joined this evening by my colleagues, June Winger, National President for the Union of National Defense Employees, and Craig Reynolds, the Regional Executive Vice President for Ontario. For 2 years, the Public Service Alliance of Canada and the Union of National Defense Employees have conducted a comprehensive analysis of contracting out of civilian work on D&D basis. We've released a report on our investigation with a series of recommendations that I encourage you to read. Along with this report, we've launched Uncover the Costs, a national campaign asking the government to stop contracting out public sector jobs to the private sector. The Public Service Alliance of Canada and the Union of National Defense Employees currently represents 19,000 civilians who work for D&D. Most are public service workers employed directly by the Department of National Defense. Some are private sector workers employed by companies who hold contracts with D&D. Privatization of public services is not new. For decades, we've witnessed the handing over of public service to mega companies. We know that what the real costs are, and they are job loss, more public spending for poorer services, and dangerous consequences for Canadians. And we ask the federal government to stop privatizing public services and invest in our public sector. Privatization costs more. D&D is not saving money by contracting out. Our report provides evidence that D&D knows this, and they know that contracting out of cleaning services, for example, can cost 35% more. Taking into account only the contracts discussed in this report, D&D is spending $68 million more than it would if it didn't privatize the work. We know this is only a sample of what is really going on. The procurement process used to contract out work is unacceptably vague. It favors corporate secrecy over the rights of Canadians to know how funds are spent, who is hired, how workers are treated, and how and why contracts are changed, and what it all means for the quality of work being done. We have submitted dozens of ATIP requests for documents that we know exist. We have received some responses. We have been stonewalled on many others, either not receiving them at all or so redacted that they are useless. This lack of transparency shows the government values its relationship with mega corporations over the right of the public to know what's really going on. Contracting out is not new, as I've said. In 2018 to 2019, contracted services totaled nearly $13 billion, more than 25% of the $46 billion spent on overall staffing. D&D alone handed out $3.7 billion worth of contracts for work that could be done by its own employees. That represents more than 1/3 of D&D's total expenditure on both civilian and military personnel. Over many years, the Parliament of Canada has passed laws that regulate public service hiring to make sure that it's done fairly and honestly, and that people are hired based on their qualifications and not on their connections. Contracting out makes a mockery of these laws. Contractors are subject to lower standards and less scrutiny when it comes to employment equity. The Employment Equity Act doesn't even apply to those contractors whose initial contract is less than $1 million. Contracts get amended without public scrutiny to allow companies to further avoid employment equity obligations. This in a time when the federal government has promised to do better to ensure that women, Indigenous, racialized, and LGBTQ2+ Canadians are represented in the public service and other institutions. Jobs that are contracted out are more precarious than jobs in the public sector. Contracts are tendered and retendered. Workers can't be sure that they will have a job if another company wins the bid. Time and again, we hear that our members who work for private sector employers may be out of work because of contract flipping. At Five Wing Goose Bay, winter seasonal workers employed by Serco were not called back for several weeks last year, while the contractor gambled that winter weather would be late and their labor wouldn't be required. The contractor had the audacity to say this would allow them to maximize their employment insurance income. At the same base, Serco has told our members that should they win the next contract, there will be job cuts. And of course, if Serco doesn't win the contract, they all may be out of work. Wouldn't it just make more sense for this work to be done in the private sector or in the public sector in the first place? An all-party report on precarious work was tabled right before the last election. It calls on the government to review human resources policies and budgeting practices to ensure that they incentivize hiring employees on indeterminate contracts. We say the government should heed that advice and stop turning work over to the private contractors, which pay poorer wages, hold back on benefits, hire part-time, casual, and temporary workers, and engage in workplace practices that are not healthy nor safe. There are options for the Government of Canada. A robust public service is a strong, reliable economic driver. The current economic crisis should be moving governments to reconsider all outside contracts and bring privatized work back in-house. This will provide decent jobs with decent pay for workers who can contribute to their local communities while providing quality service to our military and ensuring, as June Winger will tell you, that they are mission ready. Whether it's at D&D or in other departments, I can assure you that PSAC will continue to push back against the privatization of our public services. This campaign is a template for further contracting out campaigns. Threats of privatization at CRA and in call centers are looming on the horizon, and you need to know we are ready to fight them. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. So next we'll hear from June Winger, the National President of UNDE. So June Winger was elected as the National President for the Union of National Defense Employees at UNDE's 17th Triennial Convention in August 2017. She had previously served as UNDE's Executive Vice President from 2014 to 2017. Born and raised in Medicine Hat, Alberta, June started her role as an activist in the union in 1999, beginning as a shop steward for her local. Her career in national defense had begun just months earlier when she had accepted a placement in the telecommunications section for women in non-traditional roles. Since then, progressing in her union involvement, she has held nearly every position with UNDE, as well as being twice elected to the PSAC TC bargaining team. In August of 2017, June was elected as the national president of UNDE, the first female elected to this role in the union's 50-plus year history. June takes her role as a national leader very seriously and works diligently in an effort to achieve a work environment where UNDE members are treated fairly and compensated appropriately in a healthy and safe and respectful manner. Okay. Over to you, June.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Morgan and Steve, and thank you to the Ontario members for joining us this evening. As Chris has said, the Union of National Defence Employees represents about 19,000 civilian defence workers. These members are integral to ensuring that our military operations are mission ready at all times, and that our military members have safe, secure, acceptable places to live and to work. Our members work on bases, in offices, warehouses, airports, labs, and garages. We work on heavy equipment, ships, planes, tanks in Canada and across the globe. They are experts in their fields, whether it's fixing helicopters, fighting fires, cleaning mess halls, or engaging in a top secret activity that keeps Canadians and the world safe. Canadian defense work is critical for our civilian defense work is critical for our national defense services, and it is of the utmost importance that it remains public work. I speak from more than 20 years of personal experience as an employee at National Defence, including several years working as a decon tech at Canada's Counterterrorism Technology Centre. So I know that military bases are more than just big government infrastructures. They're part of our communities. In some communities, military bases are the predominant economic driver. You either work on base, in jobs that support the base, or you know someone who does. And it's the responsibility of national defense and our government to contribute to the base as good citizens and community members. In the report, we share the story of Monica. Now, Monica wasn't one of our members. She worked for one of these private companies for minimum wage. And while cleaning a medical center, Monica was ordered to water down cleaning supplies. Monica didn't have the training that she needed to properly clean the medical center that she was assigned to. She didn't even get WMIS training until late in her tenure. Monica didn't have a security clearance, but was routinely led into secure defense areas by a coworker in order to complete the work that she was assigned. In the end, Monica quit to work for a fast food restaurant chain, where she ended up with better benefits, better pay, and better hours. Is risking the health and security of our military necessary? Is this really how D&D wants the workers on its bases to be treated? Is this really how the Government of Canada wants to contribute to the community? On the Canadian Forces website, you'll read the Department of National Defence remains committed to the significant and strategic long-term investments that will ensure the Canadian Armed Forces continue to function as an agile and combat-ready force, capable of making tangible contributions and delivering on its commitments at home and around the world. We remain committed to our people and their families in providing them with the support and tools that they need to be successful at every stage of their career. We remain committed to investing in military bases and wings across the country and in the Canadian economy. The value that D&D generates through defense spending means good jobs and economic growth for Canada. Well, aren't those nice words? UND members are also committed to ensuring that we have an agile, ready force. And they would like to believe that their employer, D&D, is honestly committed to them and their families and to providing them with the tools and support that they need to be successful with good jobs. But what we know, and what the report will show you, is that D&D has been eroding the very systems that contribute to that readiness. D&D knows that privatization costs more and provides poor service. Let me share with you what a briefing note said about contracting out in Kingston a few years ago. The assessments gleaned were that inferior results were noted. The cleaning standard fell far below what was required, especially in the critical residential spaces. It was observed that in an effort to increase the profit margin, the contract cleaners were using inferior or improper cleaning products, which resulted in additional maintenance, environmental problems, and health and safety issues, resulting in unfit living conditions. More than once, we've had communications with base management who told us that they would prefer to use public sector workers for civilian work. But these managers also told us that their hands are often tied, that base budgets are rigid. Base commanders have a limited salary wage envelope from which they can pay their workers. It's rarely large enough, but conversely, they have quite a generous budget line for contracted services. And so when faced with difficult decisions, even though they know that it will cost Canadians more for a decrease in service for our military, base commanders are forced to contract out the public service work. And this is the crux of the problem and the reason why we're here today. Everyone knows what the problem is, and it's up to D&D and the Government of Canada to fix it. Now, Chris talked about the transparency and about precarious work. And over the months that we have worked on this report, we've submitted dozens of access to information requests, but most have not been answered. We can, however, glean information from the publicly available data. For example, let's talk about D&D's contract with Dexterra at CFB Kingston. Now, Dexterra is the new version of Carillion, a British mega corporation that went belly up a few years back, leaving chaos in the British public services. And you can read all about them in the report. Now, the statement of work for the contract with Dexterra indicates that the contract must, at all times, have 39 full-time managers, administrators, and cleaners. Now, even if we assume all 39 workers earn the minimum wage, this would require a payroll of over $1 million each year. But the total contract value is just over $3 million for a period of 6 years. Less than half of what it would be necessary to pay the workers minimum wage. So what's happening here? Are the workers being paid less than minimum wage? Are they being paid piecemeal? Or are the contractual obligations not being met and there's not 39 workers on site at any given time? We just don't know. And without changes in the rules that govern transparency of government data, we may never know. Without transparency, public oversight of the spending of public money, it's just not possible. So in the report, you can read an analysis on the different labor standards of different workers. And let me tell you a bit about what the pandemic has shown us. Throughout the pandemic, I've seen firsthand the lack of care and concern that private corporations contracted to D&D have for their workers and for the other workers on the base. At one base, where we represent both public and private sector workers, our public sector members were given proper provisions of protections to ensure that they and their families were as able as possible to avoid the virus, allowing them to maintain mission readiness and to keep the military mission ready in the event that they're called upon to do things like help in long-term care facilities. But our private sector members, they were forced to work unaltered hours, doing busy work. Even though the base was at minimal manning, even though D&D was going to pay the company regardless, even though D&D's direction had been to minimize contact and work. My colleagues and I spent countless days fighting for these workers to be safe. It wasn't until I was able to speak to the deputy minister that something was finally done. The contractors put their workers and their families and the rest of the workers on base, including our military personnel, at significant risk in order to continue to make a profit. It was unnecessary and it was irresponsible. We can't afford this kind of behavior. And thank goodness nothing critical happened, but it very easily could have, and that would have been unforgivable. Now you get the benefit today of knowing that this campaign over the past 4 months has already been a success. We've had over 1,000 letters sent to MPs and the minister. We've had dozens of meetings with MPs across the country, and twice now, there have been interventions at defense committees asking the questions about private contractors on base. And I've met with the deputy minister, and she's made it clear to her chiefs that this situation needs to change. Around the country, your comrades are sharing their stories. They are telling us that their base and wing commanders are talking about not contracting out, or are telling them that they don't want to contract out, but budgeting or security clearances require them to do so. We know that we're having an impact, and I hope that you and your colleagues can help us make an even bigger impact. Thank you.
Thanks very much, June. So I'm now going to introduce our last speaker. Born in St. Elizabeth, Jamaica, Craig Reynolds migrated to Canada when he was 19 to join his family in search of better economic opportunities. While studying business management studies at York University, Craig joined the Federal Public Service in 2004. Craig quickly got involved with his union at the local level. His first elected position was in 2009 when he became a steward for the Union of National Employees, UNE Local 87. Later in 2011, he was elected vice president for the local and then elected local president in 2013. There he served as local president for over 7 years, as well as serving on several committees, such as the PSAC Toronto Racially Visible Committee. In 2014, Craig Reynolds was elected alternate racially visible representative for PSAC Ontario Regional Council. and then re-elected in 2017. Craig was also elected at the 2017 PSAC Ontario Regional Convention as the second alternate regional executive vice president, or REVP, and later became the alternate REVP in 2018. Craig stepped into the role of REVP for Ontario in September 2020 with a goal to engage and mobilize our diverse and growing membership. Craig believes that the labor movement must put special focus on connecting with young workers, combating systemic racism, and prioritizing organizing new workplaces. The floor is yours, Craig.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks, Morgan. And I want to thank all the members for joining us this evening. And thanks, June and Chris, for your overview of the campaign so far. Ontario is home to several Canadian Forces bases, including Borden, Trenton, North Bay, Petawawa, and Kingston. Each of these bases have contracted out services that were once done by federal public service workers. The government's defense on this push to privatize certain base operations has always been that contracting out services such as cleaning, maintenance, food preparation, etc., will save taxpayers money. I want to focus on this point, as our report has demonstrated clearly that contracting out is costing taxpayers more money for services of lesser quality. Let's examine the recent contract awarded to CFB Trenton to demonstrate this fact. Trenton has nearly 600 of our members who work in all aspects of base operations. For years now, these public sector workers have watched while management has brought in workers who are employed by temporary help agencies. The current firm is called Adecco and is based in Switzerland. It is the second largest multinational private temporary help agency in the world. To put into perspective how large this corporation is, in 2019 alone, Adecco had revenue of over $36 billion. The recent contract awarded to Adecco in Trenton has a value of $1.9 million over 2 years. Let's break down this contract and highlight the differences between what Adecco is charging and what the cost would be if workers were brought into the federal public service. Using wages as set out in the collective agreement, the total compensation cost is described in D&D's cost factor manual. Hiring 11 workers into the public sector, cleaners, kitchen workers, warehouse clerks, and administrative clerks, would cost the department $735,000 a year, or just shy of $1.5 million for the duration of the contract. Yet the government has awarded a contract of $1.9 million to Adecco, a difference of $400,000. That's $400,000 of taxpayers' money that is being overspent and will go to Adecco's shareholders. But it gets worse. Adecco's hiring postings on their website for workers in Trenton show that they are hiring workers for part-time hours instead of full-time. They're requiring workers to be available at all times, even though some will only have part-time shifts, and workers will be responsible for the costs associated with their uniforms and footwear. The level of quality is also lowered. For example, when a cook position becomes available within the Government of Canada, Treasury Board requirements mandate that cooks in the public service need Red Seal qualifications. Yet for Adecco positions, no set qualifications are required. But it gets worse. There is no security clearance required for these workers. They may be required to pass a criminal record check, but not the standard Government of Canada security clearance that all our members have to provide. This is a serious safety breach that places everyone in the base in jeopardy. Why is the government allowing this practice to continue? The Government of Canada and D&D needs to stop contracting out and bringing back these jobs to the public service. These should be good full-time jobs where workers can have secure employment and contributes to the local economy. It's time we stop giving away money to these private companies and their shareholders. We ask the government to live up to its listed commitments to secure good jobs. I'm very excited to be here today to explore these issues and look forward to hearing from our members on what's happening at their own workplaces. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chris or Morgan, sorry.
Okay, so now we're going to move to the Q&A portion. So you are able to click on the Q&A box and then type in your question. If you want it to be anonymous, you can click send anonymously. And then Morgan and I will be monitoring the questions that are submitted. If any are the same, we'll group them together and just ask it once. If it is really specific to like an individual situation, we'll probably follow up with you individually after the webinar. But if it is a general question, we'll be sure to ask it. So the first one that I have is in 2012, a report on DCC, which I believe is Defence Construction Canada, was submitted to the government and nothing has changed as a result. Do you believe that your approach will change the government's position?
Well, I can take that.
Thanks, June.
And that's a great question. And we put a lot of work into that report back in 2012 on showing the shortcomings of DCC. And we brought that to the Standing Defense Committee, and we brought it to the Auditor General. And unfortunately, we were dealing with the Harper government at that time. They had a majority, and they simply weren't interested in building the public service. They were more interested in dismantling it, quite frankly. And so they were unwilling to recognize any proof that we are willing to give them. It was like arguing with a flat earther. I mean, like it was nearly impossible, regardless of what kind of evidence we could provide. But this report has been received, it's been looked at by the current government, the Liberal government, and certainly I don't expect them to embrace it and go, we're going to change everything, but we are seeing changes already. We are seeing already that people are looking at finding out what's going on and re-examining their contracting proposals. Just a few months ago, we were having a national UMC Union Management Consultation Committee meeting with the Deputy Minister. And one of the Assistant Deputy Ministers spoke up and said that they were putting in a process where they were going to examine every one of their contracts and make sure that it was appropriate, that it was good value, and that it wasn't something that ought to be otherwise done by public servants. So we can see movement on this. We see it nationally, but we also see it locally. For instance, the kitchens in Borden, Ontario, had announced to the local president there that they were going to re-examine how they were contracting out the work, and that they were looking at making sure that the cleaning staff were being appropriately managed by public servants and not working on not always relying on contractors. So we are not anywhere near where we want to get, but we do know for sure that we have shaken them up, that we have their attention. So I do expect that we will see things be different. I mean, we've had base commanders come up and thank us. We've had ADMs privately come up and thank us and say that they were glad that we were doing this, that they prefer to work with public servants, and they want to help us get there. So we just need to keep the pressure on and keep going. We just don't want to blink. We just keep going on this one. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, June. The next question came in French. Comme individu que puis faire dans mon unité? And I think loosely translated, as an individual, what could I do to show my support for this campaign?
Take that one too.
Thank you.
So we have a number of things that you can do. So if you're an employee of National Defense, I want you to keep an eye on what's going on at the workplace. And when you see contractors coming in doing work of public servants, I want you to ask the manager why that's happening. And I want you to notify the local union and let them know what you've seen. But I also want you to go on to uncoverthecost.ca and read our report. You'll also see on the website there that we have you just fill out a little bit of information about yourself and send a letter to your MP and to the Minister of National Defense asking them to stop contracting out public servants' work. So these are all things that you can be doing. If you're a part of a member of the local executive and you attend the Union Management Consultation Committee meetings, I want you to ask for a vacancy management report so you can track all the vacancies that are going on the base, what kind of staffing mechanism that they're using, and making sure that those positions are filled with public servants and not simply going out to contract. Bring this up at every one of your meetings so you can have a robust discussion about it. And when management comes back, if they come back saying that they're having problems due to budgetary concerns or security clearances, make sure that gets written in the minutes and highlight that up to your vice president of your region so that we can make sure that that gets addressed appropriately so those excuses no longer get used.
Thanks very much, June. So I guess we'll give it another minute or two to see if there are any more questions. A friendly reminder, if you want to ask a question, you click on the Q&A box, type in your question. If you want to send it anonymously, click send anonymously.
Steve, it's Chris. I just want to add to what June was just saying, and I really want to focus on the member of parliament and contacting your member of parliament. You know, you may think that it's not worth it, it's a waste of time. I can tell you that political action works, and if you put pressure on your member of parliament, they will respond. Especially, I mean, you know, we all figure there's a federal election just on the horizon, just a few months away from a federal election, and obviously they want to get reelected. So really pressuring your member of parliament absolutely helps, and it is effective. On another issue regarding like the contracting out, it's like the government floats these balloons from time to time just to see if they would get a reaction or not. And I'll give you an example. About 4 years ago, you may recall that Public Service and Procurement Canada actually contracted out 100 jobs to a private call center function in Toronto for the Phoenix Pay system. And we pushed back, and we pushed back hard. And we said, this is crazy. Number one, I mean, you call in there with your problem, and they'd say, well, okay, what's your name? What's your pry? Somebody will call you back. And that's it. That's the only. So we pushed back, and we lobbied members of parliament, and they closed it. It was only open for, I think it was maybe 2 months, and they shut it down. CRA, I talked a little bit in my opening remarks about CRA. CRA just announced, they just informed the component that they're going to hire 2,000 people for the upcoming tax season, because they know it's going to be an extremely busy tax season because of COVID and people working from home and that. And what we're doing now is we're fighting that because they're hiring 2,000 people, but they're going to contract out 130. Now, I don't know about any of you, but that makes absolutely no sense to me at all. You're going to hire 2,000, you're going to contract out 130. Why can't you just hire 2,130 people? It like I said, it just makes absolutely no sense at all. And it's like, well, let's just try it over here and see if we get any feedback or any pushback. Okay, yeah, we did. So okay, close it down. Well, let's try it again, and see if we get any pushback on it. So every time they talk about privatization, we've got to continue to push back every single opportunity that we possibly can.
Thanks, Chris. So we do have another question that was related. So if you have already signed the petition, or already noticed some of the changes in your workplace and brought it to the attention, what is another step that a person could take if they're interested in fighting back?
Sorry, Steve, was that a question, or was that a question for a poll or something that you're doing? I'm sorry.
No,
I
it's
didn't.
a question that came in. So like one person has asked if they've already taken some of the recommended steps. So like say they've signed the petition, they've noticed some of the things in their workplace and brought it to the attention of their local, but they're interested in doing more. Is there anything that you would recommend they could do next?
I think that you can talk it up within your workplace, even though you're not in a contracted out job, or your co-workers are not in every opportunity you get, you can be talking about, we might be next. So we've got to help this fight today so that we're not the next ones tomorrow having our jobs contracted out. And everybody can be doing that. And every time you have an opportunity, I know it's difficult in the current context, but every opportunity you have to talk to your colleagues, it's like, hey, we need, get other people involved to say, we need to fight this. You might not think that we're affected by this, but it might be us tomorrow. And the whole thing, when I talked about the 2,000 jobs that CRA are hiring and contracting out 130, it's 130 this year. It'll be 500 next year. Then it'll be 2,000 that they'll contract out and won't hire anybody. So every opportunity you get to talk about, we've got to protect our jobs to make sure that they're not contracted out, and get that buy-in, because your jobs very well may be next.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone want to add anything else before we go to the next one? Okay. So this one is directed for June. How do we know if privatization might be coming to our workplaces?
Okay, great question. So that's the question, isn't it? How do you know if you're going to be the next one? Well, you don't. So that's where you have to really keep an eye on what's happening. You have to be talking with your local union representatives. You need to be making sure that you're having those discussions with your manager, like what's happening, what's the plan, how are we moving forward? I see that Mike and Joe are getting ready to retire. What plans are in place to replace those two members so that we continue to be able to perform the services that we normally do? So these take some regular effort on being able to have those discussions and observations at the workplace, and then attend your local union meetings. Go to them, talk with each other, find out what's happening, find out what you can do to make sure that this stops. But this is all very reliant on you being willing to have those discussions. And quite frankly, people have lots of great ideas. Management comes up with a gazillion different great cost-saving ideas because they're only there for a couple of years. They don't know what's been tried and what's already failed. And so we seem to almost be experiencing a Groundhog Day from time to time when we're at the workplace. We need the members to be able to have those open dialogues with management and with the union reps to be able to make sure that everybody's aware of what's happening and have the discussions about what we can do to make sure that work doesn't get contracted out, to make sure that we're meeting with our MPs, telling our MPs how significant public services are. But not just the people at work, not just the military members, not just the MPs, but having those discussions with your friends and family too. Like those local restaurants, they probably wouldn't be remaining open if it weren't for public servants in the area that were contributing to them. Like when they were attacking our pension plans not long ago, every time I walked into a restaurant, I would ask to see the manager and tell them, hey, I'm a public servant. What do you think would happen if we didn't have a pension? How many people around here do you think would actually be in your restaurant? And every single time I got a response from those owners saying, we wouldn't be able to exist without having that kind of commerce continue in this area. So we need to continue to have these open discussions really with everybody.
Thanks very much. So two people have asked a similar question, and I'll leave it to whoever wants to jump in. What kinds of resources are PSAC and UNDE contributing to this cause? Is there a financial component, and could you provide like a ballpark figure or amount? Thanks.
Well, sure. I mean, at the UNDE Triennial Convention in 2017, the convention floor passed a $1 million budget line for union action with the contingency fund. So this all contributes to campaigns just like this, to another campaign that we were previously holding. You could be the next campaign. These budget lines allow for that sort of thing. We also passed a resolution at the PSAC convention to do a fight back campaign against the contracting out of public services, and money was appointed to that. I can't remember specifically how much, but I know that probably Chris could. I don't want to put him on the spot right now, but I can tell you that there's a shared cost between PSAC and UNDE. We are equal partners in this, and we rely a great deal on both UNDE and PSAC staff to assist with this, and we share the costs equally. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks, June. I don't have the exact dollar figure, but June is absolutely right. We do have a joint PSAC component campaign line item that we have contributed to this. I apologize, I don't have the figure right at the top of my head. But there's other resources too. We have a privatization officer, one of our staff at PSAC, who's I believe on the call, Michelle Jarash. Who's doing fantastic work around this and continues to do so. So there is, and yes, okay, Michelle is here. So it's great. And as I said, we have got to continue fighting back, even if it's one job, because that's what they'll start with. They'll start with 1, 5, 100, and then before you know it, there's several thousand of our jobs contracted out every year. Every round of bargaining, trying to get no contracting out language is always on the table, and I know that we haven't been successful for the federal public service, but we'll continue to push that at the bargaining table as well, to try to get language in our collective agreements for no contracting out.
The next question is around some of the actions that have been taken. So I heard Chris Snooks had meetings with Ontario base commanders. Is it possible to get an update on that?
Well, unfortunately, Chris Snooks is not one of the hosts on this webinar, so we won't be able to get an update from him today because I haven't received one, but I'm sure we'll be getting one soon that can be shared throughout the network afterwards.
Okay, great. And then there's another follow-up question around the budget. So I think maybe you can elaborate on how much more money can be spent specifically in Kingston. And I will check with Morgan if Chris can be a host so he can talk. I'm not sure how to do that.
Just on the question regarding how much money has been spent and how much money can we, just because the question is a two-part, how much more many can we get in Kingston to fight this? What we would need, and I would ask June to I guess to you know, obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but what we would need is basically like a strategy or a plan to say, here's what we want to do, here's how much it's going to cost. And I don't think that would be a problem, to be quite honest with you. But again, I don't have the figures right off the top of my head. But certainly if anywhere in the province, whether it's Kingston or anywhere else, Borden, Petawawa, if you want to do specific actions, then you certainly let us know, and absolutely resources and money can be provided for any kind of activity or actions that you want to carry out in your local areas.
Okay. Okay, so there has been one person who's let us know that there is a meeting tomorrow night where an update could be given at local 641. We are looking into whether or not we can figure out if Chris can speak.
So while you're working on that, maybe I could tell everybody a little bit about our You Could Be Next campaign that we held in Kingston and in Greenwood. And so what was happening was we were finding that in Kingston, the cleaners were looking at well, Kingston was looking at contracting out a great deal of the cleaners' work. And through social media, there was discussion with the members in Greenwood, Nova Scotia, that were saying, hey, that's happening with us too. And so we were able to very rapidly put together a contracting in campaign where we were saying you could be next. We identified that any job could actually be contracted out with the public service if this is what the department was going to do. So we thought we would challenge it very strongly, and we had our members in Kingston and Greenwood do major demonstrations. We had the cleaners in Greenwood went to the media, started talking about their own personal story. They started contacting their MP. They were contacting their mayor, telling their mayor how it's going to damage their city. They talked about what the loss of benefits was going to do to them, what they expect their salary would be reduced to if the work was going to be contracted out. Keeping in mind, there'd be no savings to the taxpayer. The taxpayer always pays the same or more. It's just all the workers would be now getting less, and the shareholders would be earning, well, receiving the money anyways. And so at one point, we had so many letters sent to the MP of that area. He received more letters about the You Could Be Next campaign than he actually received votes in the last election. And that all was turned off. And the deputy minister came up and said, June, just shut it down. We're not doing this. Nobody's getting contracted out. We're not going to proceed with that. So this shows that these campaigns work and will continue to work, but we have to keep our foot on the gas. We have to keep the pressure up. So I'd really like to have you join me in moving forward on this. Should I keep talking, or are you ready now?
Yeah, thank you, June, for that. Yep, so we spoke to Chris, and he said he was happy to speak in the meeting about the progress that he's made in the campaign. So Chris, if you want to take the floor, you can unmute yourself, and you're welcome to speak to that.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending this. First of all, I'd like to thank Morgan for all the great work that she has done on this campaign, working side by side with myself. We met with a lot of great MPs. You know, I've had MPs give us anywhere from 3 minutes of their time to one in North Bay just gave us 55 minutes of his time. we're really seeing some outcome on it. RP Ops is now looking at creating a pool for their trades workers, which is the first pool that I've seen in a long time with RP Ops, and which is a move forward. There's a lot going on, and you know, I know here in Kingston, in Trenton, Petawawa, we have contracting out signs that can go on your front lawn. We have buttons. Please get a hold of myself or Morgan. We will get you the signs. I will even deliver them to your house if you're in the Kingston area. We just like to see it being well participated in. Thanks, Morgan.
Thanks, Chris. Did you also maybe want to speak to how the meetings with base commanders have gone?
Overall, most of it has gone very well. We're hearing from a lot of the base commanders that yes, if they had the suite, they would love to stop contracting out. They would love it to be their own people. Some we get that really doesn't say much, but I say 90% of them, they want these as their own people. They want their own group. They have more control. They have more invested. They know that it's theirs. And I think that if we keep pushing, I think one of the next steps that we should be doing is going over top of the base commanders and going to the L1s, which is June's level. I would love to sit down with the L1 for the Army and talk about the contracting out here in Kingston. It's all yours, Margaret.
Thanks, Chris. So there's another question. Some units are having their salary wage envelope, or SWE, reduced for the next fiscal year. This will result in less hiring of public servants and more contracting out of services using operations and maintenance, O&M funds. Is there something that can be done at the national level to ensure that commanders receive enough SWE to carry on with necessary operations?
Yeah, so I can answer that. We've been told that no L1s have had their SWE reduced. So if this is something that you are experiencing at your workplace, again, we need to get those minuted and into the minutes of the Union Management Consultation Committee so that we can raise that up. Often what happens is we will be told this from one kind of manager, and then when it goes up the chain, it's either reversed if it was actually happening, or it's corrected. For instance, we had a manager in Ontario that was telling members that due to the economic increase that was negotiated in the last round of bargaining, that the department was not going to get additional funds, so they were going to have to start laying off people or not replacing them as they retire. This was completely false. I don't know where this manager got it from, but the deputy came out hard and fast after that and corrected it and had the manager recant his statement very quickly. So we need this sort of information brought up very quickly. If you can get it in writing, that's the most that's the best way being able to move forward, because I'll simply bring that up to the L1 or to the deputy, and if the manager just simply denies it, then we don't really get the problem corrected. That's why I prefer to have it in writing. But certainly that is a way to move forward on that, because there should be no layoffs. There should be no replacement of public work. When we had that You Could Be Next campaign, the deputy said that no public service work, no new public service work would become contracted out. So if public servants were already doing the work, that would not go to contract without a business case being supplied to her. demonstrating the benefit and the value to Canadians. And to this point, she has not received one business case yet. So as this comes forward, we need to be able to push back when those scenarios happen and be able to call her out on it, say, hey, you said this wasn't going to happen. And so that will give us the opportunity to begin those discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, June. So there's another question that's been asked by an attendee. Can we force management to submit business plans as directed by the DM?
So we can't force management to do anything, but we can do is go back to the deputy minister and say, you committed to having this happen. So if one section on a base is now going to contract out the work that is normally done by public servants, then that should be brought up to the base or wing commander. If that can't get resolved there, then you should be bringing that up to your VP right away so that that can get addressed either through the L1 or the deputy. And I assure you that I will be going back to the deputy if we can't get it resolved, and expecting that she lives up to her commitment that she made. And frankly, I have faith that she will live up to that, but I've been let down by others before, so we'll see when we get there. But this is where we need to continue to apply that pressure.
So I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, but I'll give folks a minute in case there is something else that you'd like to ask of the panelists. Perhaps in the meantime, in case folks are just taking a minute to gather their thoughts, is there anything that any of the panelists want to add about the campaign or?
Sure, I'd like to feel like I've been hogging all the time, but I'd like to thank obviously Chris Aylward for coming, and for Craig Reynolds, VP for REVP, I'm sorry, for Ontario. But I'd also like to thank yourself and Chris Snooks for really doing so much of that groundwork, and going out there and talking with the members and trying to figure out what's going to work best in the Ontario region. And so I would ask everybody who's participating to please connect with Chris, connect with Morgan. Let's get working together so that we can make this campaign the best possible, so that we can keep public service work done in the public service, so that we can keep good jobs for yourselves, for your kids, and your kids' kids. Like, there's no reason why Canada shouldn't have a strong public service. We've received so many commendations for being such a good, strong, valuable public service in comparison with all others across the world. Let's keep it there. And I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. I know that it's a lot of time on the screen, but I seriously appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you in the future.
You're on mute, Morgan.
Yes, I am. Thank you. So thanks so much to all of our panelists, to all of the attendees for taking the time to join us this evening to ask some really great questions of the panelists, and to continue to engage in the campaign to spread the word. to, if you haven't already, to sign the letter that June alluded to, the uncoverthecosts.ca website, and to get in touch with Chris and or myself to continue to engage in the campaign. Yeah. Right, so thank you so much, folks, and I think that's it for this evening. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.